So thank you all for being here. I really appreciate you spending some time with us. I want to welcome you to the JCC Excellence Showcase. This session is Employee Relief Fund. If this is not the session you want to be at, you can go back to Spot Me and select a different session. My name is Joy Brand Richardson. I'm coming to you from JCC Association. I am the Vice President of Professional Development. And this session is being recorded. So I just want to make sure that if you don't want to be part of the recording, you put your camera off, although we would love to be able to see everyone's faces. Please reach out to me or my colleague, Dory Donnell, who will be able to help you navigate any parts of the conversation or the chat if you have a question. We're really thrilled to be able to offer this conference to you at no cost to your JCCs, and that is because of our wonderful vendors and sponsors. So please do make some time to visit them tomorrow in the vendor hall. I'd like to spend some time introducing our presenters. Johanna Fine is the Chief Human Resource Officer at JCC Chicago. She's a strategic HR leader who partners with senior leadership and management to develop and execute different kinds of programming, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all kinds of employee relations and training. Addie Goodman joined the JCC in Chicago in March of 2014. She has served as the Chief Advancement Officer, Chief Operating Officer, and was named the President and CEO in September of 2018. They're here with us to tell us about this remarkable program that was developed right as the pandemic was starting in April 2020. At the start of the pandemic, when they saw that there was a need, the leadership at JCC Chicago invited the board of directors to support the Employee Emergency Relief Fund. So I'm going to turn it over to the two of them. Everybody else, please stay muted until it's time for questions and answers. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to say that we have a lot of our JCC Chicago folks on the call, and we might choose to put a couple people on the hot seat to have you chime in about how you feel about what we're sharing today. Johanna and I are going to tag team a little bit. And again, JCC Chicago, we are a system, one of the last, if not the last remaining system in the JCC movement, comprised of about a dozen locations. So we're 7 early childhood centers, 9 day camps, overnight camp, retreat center, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And of course, like all JCCs, when the shutdown happened, we found ourselves with no revenue coming into the agency, which then of course led to what many of you experienced or have heard about in the movement, staff furloughs and other types of measures taken to help maintain agency solvency during a period of no revenue. And while that was happening, we recognized that there was about 80% of our staff who found themselves on a furlough list one way or another. And we knew that that was creating a hardship. A lot of our staff, are frontline essential workers and rely paycheck to paycheck on their jobs and employment with JCC. We made a quick pivot to both recognize the financial need among staff, ideate a way that we could support them, and communicate to those who are stakeholders for the agency that this is a need that we are prioritizing. This direct assistance fund, which we call the Employee Emergency Relief Fund, was really fueled in full through funding by our board members. And I'll talk a little bit later about how the board members were primed to do that, and maybe some other ways that that can be a good groundwork for progress in terms of employee and agency support. And this, in terms of the communication to invite support, we offered opportunities for donating fees, fitness membership fees, et cetera, early childhood tuition that would have been credited to make a one-time or recurring donation. And they could also specify, like, I want my relief fund to go to this location or that location as a multi-site center that is appealing to many. Still, even though we had a little bit of tuition reimbursement and stuff like that, the majority of it came through true philanthropy, really at the hands of our board members, who did accept both one-time gifts, and some did make multiple gifts every month for a period of time as well.
So I'll talk a little bit about how we determined what the program was going to look like. We wanted to be sensitive to the employees, obviously asking for relief funding is never easy, and it was a position that so many people were put in so quickly, and it is something that we wanted to recognize but also handle delicately. So we created a confidential process where employees filled out a form that was it included all of the taxable, non-taxable need information. We worked closely with the appropriate departments on that. And I received all of the requests confidentially from employees. And we basically reviewed the criteria on a uniform basis, which is that employees had to demonstrate a loss within their household. It didn't mean that they had to have a loss within their job, but within their household, they had to have a loss. The award was up to $500 monthly, taxable or non-taxable, depending on their situation and what they were requesting the money for. And then we allowed people to reapply every month that we had funding. As Addie said, we received funding, and we communicated that as long as the funding still kept coming, we would provide that funding as long as we had it. And what was really wonderful is that we had a total of just over $117,000 that we were able to award to employees. And the awards lasted from April through August of 2020. There were 126 unduplicated employees who received funding. And some employees did request multiple months, but 126 unduplicated employees is a lot of employees. And we felt really good about being able to help them. It was a total of 240 monthly payments. And the payments helped with everything from mortgage, rent, utilities, grocery, car payments, diapers, baby supplies, other essentials that people really needed to be able to get through their month. During the pandemic, we also added something that we felt very strongly about, which is we covered the employee portion of benefits of the healthcare plans during all of the days that were furloughed. We felt, this was a healthcare pandemic, and we needed to be there for our employees.
I think our theme really is the care and keeping of staff. And I think, I'm a relatively new CEO, especially considering the depth of the field. And the care and keeping of staff is a priority, is not something that was top of mind in my other roles in the agency. And I think that recognizing, like Joe said, that we were going to make sure that if you weren't receiving income from us, that we weren't also charging you for your benefits. We were just going to take care of you. That we were able to help no matter what your loss was. We did not require any type of pay stub or documentation that clarified that proved the loss, but rather an explanation of the loss and what you needed. So it was really a trusting process for the staff. And we've seen a lot of incredible good come from that. And I am going to just, those of you who are JCC staff, think a little bit about how it felt when you first heard it, because I'd love for you to chime in a little bit from the staff perspective. In terms of those dollars and how we got them, JCC Chicago's loss was over $7.5 million of revenue not realized due to closure. It's a big number, and we have in fact been able to fully address it. But that $120,000 early on, before we had addressed it, was pretty appealing in terms of relief. But our ask to the board was not for the agency. Our ask to the board was for the staff. JCCs are built on staff. Our programs are only great because of staff. We are a human organization filled with people who make differences every day. And that's core and just crux of who we are and what we do. In terms of the board being ready to make this type of a gift, just a handful of years ago, our board was not particularly philanthropic. And what has happened over time, the very first time I asked the board for money and they really hadn't been giving at a great level, my suggestion was any dollar you give above and beyond what you gave last year is going to go to a special project. And for us, that was the renovation of one of our early childhood centers. And that little bit of extra from the board members that year turned into a $500,000 mini campaign that really breathed incredible new, just light and freshness into one of our organization centers. We've also had the board, we've raised our hands for added capital commitments in addition to their annual fund commitment. That was a couple of years ago. We've raised our hand for early childhood classroom wish lists, things like that. And I think that our raising our hand for something important and timely has become something that is not unexpected among our lay leadership. So I think that they were really ready to go ahead and meet a need that we said we really had. I think it also felt really good, as we know that direct support is gaining traction as opposed to older models of, federated giving or combined support. The directness of giving dollars to a person who otherwise may not be able to pay their bills or support their family or buy food for their household was a real feel good. And we reported frequently out to the board of how many people, how many grants, how much money was left. Some people continued to give. Oh, well, you're running low. Here's another $5,000, just to make sure that the entire organization felt held by leadership and in ways that were of importance and relevance for themselves. So I think that's an overview of what we did. I think there's countless applications and learnings from it, but I'd really love to hear, certainly, of course, any questions for Johanna and I. And if any J staff want to talk about what that felt like, we'd love to hear from you too.
I'm going to unspotlight you so that we can see all the tiles of the 34 people. And that way, if you have something you want to say, you can either raise your hand or just chime in. And
while we're waiting for folks, I just wanted to read a couple of quotes of the impact that we received. Very often, HR, as many of you know, sometimes has the tough job of delivering or being involved in news that isn't always positive. And so being the one who received these requests, I felt so honored to be able to communicate to employees that we were able to help them, that they sent me emails back. And some of the quotes literally made my week. All I can say is you are the best. I so appreciate you. I wish I could hug you right now. Be well, and thanks to you and the leadership team. It's been so hard with my wife losing her job. Here's another one. Thank you so much for the extra support. I was definitely in need due to pregnancy and preparing for my son. We had to cancel my baby shower and all the extra support. You guys at the J are truly like family. So it really reinforced the feeling that people really appreciated what we were doing, and it has continued. But I like Addie said, I would love to hear if anybody on the call has other comments they want to make from the office.
You can go ahead and unmute yourself, or you can raise your hand, or you can put something in the chat and I will read it out. You didn't know your staff was so shy, did you, Addie?
Come on, guys. It's a new mental model for our organization, I think, in terms of the staff really feeling that the organization was ready and taking action to go above and beyond expectations. And I think that we've been working very hard on culture and morale, and these were easy decisions to make. It was hard to make the decision to furlough staff. It was easy to make the decision to support people through a period of hardship. And I think it does reflect a shift in how we approach the organization and our work. And we saw that come back to us in leading edge pulse surveys, employee satisfaction surveys among staff, that when we surveyed in June, which was right around the furlough period, and then when we surveyed later in November, feeling supported, feeling like we understood and had their back, feeling proud to be part of the agency, those scores were all at record level highs. And I do think that something like this, which is not just leadership, I know the quotes that Johanna shared, they mentioned leadership, but that our lay leadership really fueled the dollars is, I think, is also a new mental model for them, that they actually can have a direct impact on the lives of staff and the agency in such a personal way.
I see the question in the chat about the board support, and the question of it's all support for employees. Yes, the entire funds raised was provided for all staff, full-time or part-time. As long as you worked for the agency full-time or part-time, you were eligible. In fact, we had staff that did not work. They were furloughed. We didn't matter if they were furloughed, active, full-time, part-time. If they submitted an application, they were given funding. We did not limit it at all.
So when you think about like a part-time swimming instructor or lifeguard is in a different bucket than, you know, your director of early childhood. But a human is a human. And if a human needs support, that's what this fund was there for. Without judgment, without, you know, qualification other than a raised hand saying, I need some help. And I think, and again, you know, the equality across the staff to make this happen, I think also is a shift in mental model, because I my own experience is that some JCCs, you know, really lean into a hierarchical structure, and I'm not a big fan of that. So we shy away from sort of the, you know, where people sit in an org chart, and much more the impact that we have as a collective. So I do think that that was an important point. Thanks, Joe, for mentioning it, that equitable across the board, no matter who you are.
Exactly. And I think it's one of the first times that we have done that, and it really had culturally made a huge significance, as Addie said, with the pulse surveys, and I think it will continue to as well.
I just want to pipe in and say I was not at the J when I started in October of 2020, so I was not there when this employee relief came through. But when I was being recruited, I heard about it, and I'll let you know that it was a great recruitment tool as well, to know that as an incoming staff person, that the board was behind the team at this level was really effective in recruiting for me to come join the J. And it was thrilling to see it as part of our impact report that we recently put together.
I see Kim Preston has her hand up. Would you like to unmute yourself, Kim?
Sure. I just want to say I was so proud to work for an organization who took care of us on that level, and everyone was so sorry, man. It just was, they were, like Jill said, they were walking the walk, and we talked a lot about gratitude at that time, and this just was another example of showing gratitude on both levels. So I'm just so proud to be part of this organization.
You know, I think that some of the, I was just at the, my session before this was focused on Brian Schreiber and his organization, and kind of a new thinking around early childhood, and how, the approach and importance of early childhood and how we run that department. One of our staff members has reminded me that yes, we did the employee relief fund, and yes, we covered the employee portion of benefits. We did make a very hard decision to have 2 weeks unpaid during the course of FY21, one in October and one in April. The 2 months where we get 3 paychecks, one of those paychecks would be limited to 1 week of pay only. And we were clear in our commitment that if there was anything that was going to be restored, first and foremost, it would be pay for our staff. And I think it was around February, March, we gave back the week in October that we took. So people got an extra week on their paycheck, and we didn't take the week in April. And there are some things that have gone by the wayside to make way for keeping our staff whole. And I think being able to honor a goal, and again, through fundraising to make that happen, the stickiness of commitment among, I think, the entire organization, and the feeling of the collective, because everybody was in the same boat. Everybody had a furlough, everybody got the dollars back, everybody could apply, anybody who applied and qualified got it. I think that that's made us feel, for an organization like ours, which is a system again, pretty siloed in terms of geography and program department, has brought us closer together as a staff in a bunch of different ways.
One of the questions that just came up was how might we utilize this for other non-pandemic relief needs. So Addie, maybe you could talk a little bit about how you think this could be utilized with an agency at a different time, when maybe there's a different initiative.
Yeah, I can think of a whole bunch right off the top of my head. We are just in conversation now in one of our geographies where teacher compensation is a little bit lower than some of the competitive locations. And so we're talking about an uptick in compensation for that teacher pool. We have a number of staff, you know, our professional development budget has been limited, and we have some staff who are really interested in continued professional development, and some of those opportunities are costly. I think that these are two examples where, again, if your board is primed, you've done your work in stewarding them as true ambassadors and stakeholders for the organization. When you raise your hand and say, and we had no goal for the board members around this employee relief fund. We didn't say, can you give a minimum of 1,000? We said, will you please make a contribution? That would be great. And I think, like 80 to 90% of people did. And we had a contribution as large as $20,000 from one individual to support our staff. So if you come up within your organization, you see a need where this is really over the skis in terms of our budgeting for next year, maybe because of relations to the pandemic, or maybe just it was never in our budget, but we would like to bring it into reality. I think there's a way to package a need, raise your hand for support, and then report out those outcomes like any funder. With a different kind of approach, because these really should be the folks who have your back. That with agencies in distress, the staff is in distress, here's a group that's at the ready and interested and able to help.
Are there any other questions or anybody that is from Chicago that would like to add to this discussion?
Okay, well then I'm going to call on Brad because he's been here for a very long time and can more speak to, I think, than anyone else who's part of our organization on the call, what it feels like today, having implemented some of these staff supports versus what it was like before.
Thanks, Addie.
Sure, no problem, Brad.
No, it's good. It was great to listen and love the presentation. And hi, everybody. I'm the Chief Operating Officer, and I've been with JCC full-time since September of '98, and I've seen the agency grow, develop, and really advance over the course. And I think in this moment in time, as Kim spoke and as Jill spoke, really the care for staff and being able to be there for staff during, a difficult time. It's really been a stand up, I think, for our agency. And I think what it does is it leads to across the board, right? From the leadership team to the director level, manager level, to our day-to-day, line staff, and, in all of our departments, and the teachers who came back to work, immediately to reopen early childhood, and our day camp staff last year to open day camp. And, I think it's the confidence builder in people. The other element I would say is people being able to share. And one of the elements, right, is we know this was and still is a vulnerable time. And what a way to be supportive as an agency as we went into uncharted territory together versus just clamp down and shrink and not open our arms, and going through it together and really just being open and honest about it as well.
Brad, I think you bring up a good point, which is I think a previous muscle memory for JCC Chicago was to, cut and strip the agency in times of hardship. And I think that oftentimes that sat on the shoulders of the staff. And so I think to flip that mold and say, if we have any dollars, it's going first to staff. And then we'll figure out what we're doing next felt very different than how it felt before.
Yeah, I also think one of the things that Addie did that was very different than what we've done before culturally is there was transparency and frequent communication about the pandemic, but utilizing this example in a way for whatever you might need. I think just the more open and honest communication that you can provide to the staff about whatever the need is that you're trying to fulfill or manage, the more, I think, culturally you're going to find that people will be engaged and want to not only help, but be excited that the ask is being made, that people are giving money, et cetera. I think that that was a real key turnaround for us as well.
If I could jump in here, I would just say, absolutely. I think transparency was so huge. And I really compare it to when I talk to my friends who are at profit organizations and sort of how impressed that they were that us being a nonprofit, the way that we could be so fiscally responsible, but also at the same time, being so caring and nurturing during such a scary time. I don't even think that we can put ourselves in the place of how terrifying it was on a daily basis when we're reading about Jay's closing, about going down to, staffs of one or none. And that to actually find out that, you know, there's a plan in place. We're continuing to work. We've got you covered through this date. We have paychecks through here. We're not going to do furloughs until we have to. And then when they did finally come, you know, they were applied fairly evenly across the board. You know, to me, the benefits thing was so huge. That's one of the big reasons why I love working at the J, because the benefits are so strong for us and so comprehensive. So all those things were just so impressive. And the fact that leadership really did, as I said, they walked the walk. I mean, I felt like even before I maybe could have anticipated something, I think that they came through with really creative solutions and ideas. When Addie talked about those 2 extra weeks of paychecks, that, you know, that was another way to maybe recover money if they needed to, but they said, if we don't need it, we will give it back. And I think we all assumed it was a foregone conclusion that we're not going to get it back, and we moved on, and we were all happy that no one had to lose jobs. And then to hear in the beginning of the year that like we were getting that money back, it was like, I mean, it was really great. It was a great moment. And, you know, I am very appreciative and proud to be part of the organization.
Thank you,
Thank
Jill.
you. There's actually a couple of questions that came in. There's a question from Rob about what was financial taxable versus non-taxable. We worked closely with our finance team and made sure that on the actual form, the employees had to mark what they were utilizing the funds for. And basically, we took direction from the finance and accounting department that there are certain, for example, there are certain things that are not taxable versus taxable, and the mortgage, rent, car payments, utilities, groceries, they fall into 2 different categories. So I can't recall which was taxable versus not, but the employee did have to mark that on the form in order to then confirm whether or not they were going to have a taxable or non-taxable relief. And then the other question is the funding continuing now that the pandemic is calming slightly? The funding actually only lasted us through August. It was about 17 weeks that we had funding for, and we just continued to provide it as the money came in. So until the money was no longer, we continued to provide it to people asking. So it did allow us to provide for quite a long time, 17 weeks, but no, we are not continuing to fund that at this point.
You know what that reminds me of though, Johanna? I think that, well, we, you know, we're forthcoming with a, you know, employee relief fund, and we kind of created a pot of money and decided how to deploy it. That has also inspired within our own organization some other strategies. So for example, some of our early childhood directors now have some discretionary dollars where they can deploy at their discretion. So, you know, is this, does a hire that I'm trying to make really need a sign-on bonus, which we don't do as an organization at large, but if this is someone you really need, you could use some discretionary dollars for that. Does some of your staff need additional program benefit, or, you know, what else does a family who's coming not really qualify for fee assistance, but you have some discretionary funds to be able to encourage them to make this Jewish choice of early childhood? I think that there's a lot of ways that trying something new that we hadn't done before has fueled some other opportunities, and it's given us comfort as a leadership team to go ahead and execute. We're okay with, I've always been comfortable with discomfort and risk, but I think that even in times of financial stress, to be able to say this, we know the ROI on here is worth it and then some. And that's really how the employee fund felt. The ROI is absolutely unmeasurable. It is significant, it is meaningful, it is felt, it has really become, I think, part of who we are as an agency, that feeling that we take care of our own like that. And so I think that the benefits of trying some new things, even if they cost some dollars that you might not have or might otherwise deploy, it's good to take a real laser focus on the team that makes our work happen.
Thank you so much, Addie and Johanna. I see we are at the top of our hour, and I want to thank you both for giving us time, and everybody else from the Chicagoland JCCs who have chimed in and told us about your experience. Just a few quick announcements. If you can go back to Spot Me and click on the J Cafe, it'll take you to Kumo Space where we can continue the conversation. It's a fun place where we can network. You can. I'm going to be in the swimming pool. I don't know where Dory Donnell is going, but each room is set up so that you can chat individually with people. It's a fun exciting way to be able to continue conversations. And a quick reminder that the vendor hall is open tomorrow afternoon, Eastern time at 1:45. So thank you again for being, first of all, congratulations for being accepted as one of the JCC Excellence programs. Everything that you've shared with us certainly shows us about your culture and how you've been able to make changes and really get the buy-in from the board and your staff. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you all for being here. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Have a great rest of your day.